Yeah, I've got a great question here. When you've applied the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander co-design principles, have you noticed a powerful shift in peoples, such as system actors, mindsets and actions? Oh, that's a lovely question, Belinda. Thank you so much. I would say yes. So what have I noticed? I think first of all that there are. I think when you talk about allyship and what you can be as an ally in this work, it appeared to make a really big difference to people knowing what their role could be in it and understanding what they could do. So I found that people felt like they were able to act more in allyship because we gave some definition to it and we helped them to understand what they could and couldn't do. So that was really useful and surprising. I think another thing that we saw was the power it gave to my peoples in all of this, particularly through their ideas, their ability to influence, the concepts that they were able to raise that have been listened to and written and are online. So you'll see that if you get the chance to have a look at the report, and actually I could put it on the chat, the link, you'll see where people have done that. So I would say that they're probably the great things that both what my own peoples have seen, but also what others have seen. Thanks for people that have asked some of these questions. So actually some easy ones. So one of the questions was about attribution, so about the principles. So what I'll do is I'm going to send the links to Jax, so you can both look at the summary report that's what was done out of this project, but also the 200-page qualitative report, which goes into all the details of who we spoke to and how we did the process and everything, if you've got the time to have a look at a document like that. So and it's actually Department of Human Services that it's on their website, but you'll see that both my colleague and I are represented in the documents. That's easy. What advice have you got for allies who want to respond to actions to support decolonisation? So I think one of the key things that I think is really important is if you are willing to genuinely make a personal connection with our communities, actually that changes a lot if you can do that. So one of the first things I would suggest to do is to get to know your local community, your local nation. You know, in that respectful, curious way where you could have a door slammed in your face or whatever it is, that could happen. You know, that's not, it might not all be, you know, hey, arms all open and just come in. But I would say that if you are willing to, and if you really want to think about decolonisation, the first thing is to get a personal connection with the community and to learn to whatever extent you are allowed to learn. So I would just say that as a starting point. Other things will make sense afterwards if you just do that first. So, yeah. Oh, this one's an interesting one. What do I think about Jacinta Price? This is really tricky. So, you know, I think Kellyanne and use different words for this, but it's a similar idea. One of the things that as an Aboriginal person that does this work is I know my place. So when Kellyanne was talking about, am I the right one to, you know, in Aboriginal business, I know exactly, I've been taught by my elders, by my community, where my place is. And what I've learned is that my place is to be a connection, is to be able to sometimes be a neutral person as best I can, to bring together different systems and peoples and work and all sorts of things. And and the reason why I know that is because I have elders that vouch for me, I have community that vouch for me, I have organisations that invite me back over and over again, and I'm in community control as well. And so what I've learned is that my place, and it resonates on a personal level for me too, is that it's not my place to criticise my people. And Jacinta, even though I don't agree with everything she says either, she's still a sister girl. And so I really struggle with that. So I struggle with what she says sometimes, but then I deeply empathise with experiences that her communities and she has gone through, because I've been there as well. It's just that I've come at it in a different way. So I think that's what I would say is she's still a sister. And I do think that because of certain things that happen in our lives, we communicate what we think in different ways. Now, others of my people, it is their place to speak out against that and to be more of that, the agitators and fighting. And I'm the wind. I'm the wind beneath people's wings, and I'll support people to do that, but I don't find it's my place. Yeah. Wonderful to have involvement through design, including evaluation, what helps sustain. So I think what's been really lucky about this, I was just having a chat with colleagues in the breakout room. This is one of the few projects I've been able to share publicly, because the work I do is often with government colleagues. It's sensitive, it's all sorts of things, and you can't share it. And so what's been really great is that you'll be able to see the reports, and it'll show you what said were the main things that we were going to do, but also what it says is what the government committed to. And I'm actually also been invited back with people with lived experience and others that were involved in the original project to be involved in designing stuff. So I can actually tell you that in that project, literally that's what's happening right now. The bit I can't tell you about is the evaluation side, because we're still in the design phase and working with people, families with lived experience and others to do this work. So that's how I know it's public, it's out there, and I happen to be lucky enough to be invited with other colleagues to get involved. So hopefully I can say to you one day, the evaluation stuff was also built in. Yes, so Sarah, you asked that question about Principle 4, so basically people perspectives as Aboriginal people informing the broader co-design. This project is probably one of the ones that I've had the closest contact with, that it's actually occurred that way, and that will be more meaningful once you see the report. So you'll see in both reports, Aboriginal voices are throughout the whole thing. They're prioritised as a whole separate section, and then they actually are intertwined throughout the whole piece of work and embed throughout. Do you have any questions you ask allies to consider about how appropriate their role is before commencing work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities? This is really interesting, and I have been asked this before, and it's tricky. So I think for me, broadly speaking, if I go back to that issue, and it both goes back to Kellyanne's points, what is my place in this work? I ask myself that question. And you know what? There are times when my own people will block me out of work, out of doing a particular thing, or they'll keep me aside for a while, whatever it is. I don't see that as an attack or anything like that. I see that as them. I see my people guiding me into the right ways. And because they know that if I'm meant to be there, they'll welcome me there. And if I'm not meant to be there, then they're going to block me out. And that's the right thing. So that's sort of the attitude I take. But some things that I think are really important is, generally speaking, if you are a non-Aboriginal organisation being invited into work, I would generally not do that without Aboriginal people involved in it. So I would always walk alongside. So in the same way that if I was invited to work with culturally and linguistically diverse, or other diverse communities, I wouldn't walk in there unless I could be an ally to someone that is leading that work. That is a key part of that community, or has been invited in as an ally or something, So that's how I take my judgment. I judge it from the people, whoever they are, and everything is okay. It's not an offence. It's nothing like that. That's cool. That's good. It's learning. And then in general, if you're a non-Aboriginal organisation, I would always walk alongside Aboriginal people on that, whenever you can do it. And some of the greatest allies I've seen. So one of the great group that I work with, Emerging Minds, they don't focus on employing Aboriginal people inside their organisation. They fund out to community control. They bring people in like me. They fund Aboriginal organisations to do the work. Yeah, that's powerful. That's Aboriginal led. That's self-determination. So yeah, there's different ways to think about it, but I think it's pretty important that you walk alongside Aboriginal people. They give you good guidance, and they help you not to make really big mistakes as well. Do you think project working groups are an effective way of building a strong working relationships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participants and allies? I think this goes back to the issues and both that Morgan and Kellyanne touched on. It depends on your ability to really influence and to have a genuine status in having some influence on what's happening. Because you're right, you can set up all sorts of groups that look like people are involved. You can do that all the time, but there's no genuine things happening where there's real control. So I think it's actually really going, are people really being given status here? Is the nature of their voices having an impact on what's happening? And are they beginning to see the change? I know when my elders tell me that something good is happening, I'll know that something's really changing. That's what I listen to. So similarly in this. And then finally, have you got advice to get people past the mindset that we don't want to be tokenistic, so we won't do anything? Yeah, I think the important thing is, I think that issue about as an individual, focusing on your level of awareness, reflecting and listening to community, all of those things are really, really important. But I think what you want to do as well is to take small steps. And I know this is hard. It goes back to that issue about, sometimes it's, you've got commercial interests. There's other issues that are going on. I'm really lucky that I get to choose all things I do now. And I can make that choice as an individual person about the work that I do and what's right, what I think is right. But I think it's good to make small steps. And as I said before, if you can on a personal level, whatever it is your profession tells you to do, if you genuinely want to work with my people, you will have a personal commitment to this. And you can do that in a genuine way, no matter what your job says and or what you need to do in that. So thanks so much for your wonderful questions, everybody. I hope that helps.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks so much. Maybe we should move along, and Morgan, if you'd like to answer the question in your column, and then we can move on to Kellyanne. This might be a good approach for now.
Sure thing. So I'll just give brief responses. I always find it a bit weird when I'm asked to answer really global, broad questions about things. This whole kind of thing around expertise is a thing, so I like to say I have expertise, but I'm not an expert, even though people would probably see me as one. But so I guess my thoughts are coming just through what I see and feel and understand in my own practice is a good thing to start with. So the first question is about where are we falling short or going astray in elevating lived experience in co-design? And I guess my answer to that is that we're still trying to elevate co-design rather than having co-designers with lived experience is my answer. So I know it's taken me a really long time to get to where I'm at now, and I'm someone with a hell of a lot of privilege in a system. And even I've found it really, really tough without a lot of social capital to get to where I am. So I'm very interested in pathways to getting, especially young people who, and I know so many who are already very natural systems thinkers, in pathways, getting them scholarships into getting where they need to go. I think the most frustrating thing for me is there are so many application processes for people to get just the social capital that they need, and they're targeted at a very specific kind of person, and they're usually white and middle class, and they're people that know how to write applications, who have literacy skills. And so the thing that I want to see is co-design agencies and organisations opening their doors for scholarships for different kinds of people to get into this career at all. Yeah, it's an extremely difficult career path, and I don't see a whole lot of opportunity for people, especially from different classes, to be getting into this space. So I think that'd be an amazing opportunity, rather than saying to people, you're not quite ready. No, we're going to close the door. How are we actually going to help people get ready, if that's our definition of ready? Asking when do you raise your lived experience in the workplace, and how can you take the workplace on the journey? Oh my God, I could spend a whole day and more on this question. Again, I hesitate to say do this and this and this, because it's weird and it's very contextual given who you are, what position you're in, what organisation you're in. I guess my takeaways have been I've had so many allies in organizations, and I would not be here if it wasn't for the allies that I had. And I can't stress that enough, that if I didn't have certain people lifting me up, which I now try to do with the people that I'm working with, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. And so, and I think I was talking to someone in a breakout room about this. The question here is about how do we shift a culture so there is an easier sharing of lived experience. This is broader than just an individual person. And I think when you come in with, as a person with lived experience, we're tasked with doing the work and shifting a whole culture, which is like literally really hard. So not to say that that's impossible, because I've seen it done and I've definitely been part of doing that with my people. But we forget how much it actually takes to shift a culture to see you as a human being. And I think a really good illustration of this is how we talk about mental health and ask for help and reach out. But as soon as someone discloses something about mental health, we almost recoil. And so there's something here about protection. You know, I'm not going to just go out there and say, just be open about your lived experience and just share away. It's actually really harmful for me to do that. So what I'd say is try and find some more of your people and try and gather some momentum and figure out how you might create change in that way. And I suppose a good tip from me is that I have found my people in places I wasn't expecting to find them to. And sometimes that does take a level of openness about your intention and who you are to know who those people are. But again, there's risks involved in that. So sorry if that's not hugely helpful, but it's very contextual. What advice you might have to organisations and governments who hire co-designers? What are some must-haves to include in a brief? I guess just to be brief, so I'm not taking up too much other space, I'd be asking, I'd like you to illustrate how you're bolstering communities. And if you are going to be a part of this project, can you illustrate the team you would have around you and who you would be having lead you? I think, as Dana beautifully said, if you're not working with an ally in that space who's leading the project, what are you doing there? You know, there's that whole concept about stay in your lane. And I don't think it's that people can't be supporters, but to be leads on projects like this, when you don't have a lived experience or a stake in that community, can be extraordinarily harmful. And so I'd be saying to that co-designer, I'd like for you to illustrate how you've stepped aside, actually, in context, rather than just what have you done and achieved. How have you actually bolstered and strengthened communities of people with lived experience around you during your time? So hopefully that's helpful.
I see there's a question here for the panel about design studios who are doing this work. So I thought I might add a few comments about that one, if that's okay, not to jump around.
Okay.
So I think in terms of when this is the right work and when it's not, it might be helpful just to take a couple of steps back. So I think the first thing is often when someone might come to me and say, we want to do co-design, what I sort of often say to them is, when you say co-design, what does that mean? And, you know, people's answers are all the way from like, I want to do a survey, through to, not very often, but through to, I want to share power and decision making with communities or people with lived experience. There's a really particular activity I often do with clients, colleagues, which is I've got like this very big actual paper ladder that has different rungs on the ladder, and each rung has a different design practice on there. So the lower rungs have designing like at people or for them, and then the higher rungs are about co-production, co-design, or being entirely led by community and people. And often we do kind of a few activities to understand, one, the different rungs, but also what they'll ask of us as we move up them. And often, because we use design terms so interchangeably, people haven't actually realized that when they're asking for co-design, what they actually wanted was a workshop and, you know, user-centered design, and that they're not really ready to shift their governance to allow for co-design or even co-production. So I think part of it is helping to build people's literacy to know what they're asking for in the first place. And really those are kind of good consulting skills, which many of us would have if we've come from some kind of consulting background of understanding what people are asking for and why they're asking for it. I think the second one is because we dwell in silos so often, sometimes we don't even know the projects that happened across the like hallway from us or down the road. So sometimes when people ask for things, we need to do some of our own research to see what's already been done, as well as where there are efforts, for example, by First Nations communities that are already working well but are overlooked and undervalued by policymakers. So we kind of have to do some heavy lifting, I think, in this to help people articulate what they're actually talking about and build their design literacy. When projects haven't been right for CoDesign has been sort of a few times. Evidently through COVID, there's been a lot of projects that shouldn't be CoDesign and can't be CoDesign because of the demand and the emotional labour that people would have to give to a process whilst having diminished personal resources themselves. There's also been a number of projects that haven't been able to be or shouldn't be co-designed because of the risk of contact, but also the fact that a digital delivery would be totally insufficient and not affirming enough for a particular community. And I guess what this is really about, of course, is having conversations with people. And if you're not a senior person inside your organisation, knowing who those people are that you can go to and say, this doesn't feel right to me, I don't think this is appropriate, can you help me communicate this sort of up the line if you're not that person? In terms of design studios who are doing this work, I'm sure there's heaps of them I don't know about, but the ones that I do know about and really value their work is Creative Reaction Lab in the US do amazing work under the banner of what they call equity-centered design, and lots of work around dismantling white supremacy that's built into lots of the commercial methods that we've adopted from the US. The CoDesign Lab in Auckland do really good work, as well as the Southern Initiative. The Australian Centre for Social Innovation do really fantastic work across lots of areas. Relative Creative, that's led by Tristan Schultz in Queensland, do like really incredible work and Indigenous led. And then there's a design agency, I'll just put this word in the chat because everyone might not understand my Kiwi accent, but are called Oi, and they're run by a group of Wahine Māori designers who are real, just awesome. So those are probably some of my favourites to go to. And then there's a few practitioners like Sasha Constanza Chock, who wrote Design Justice and is part of the Design Justice movement, that also has incredible sort of writing and frameworks for us to be learning from and with. It's my 2 cents.
I'm wondering, Morgan or Dana, would you like to do you have anything to add to that question about other groups?
Nothing to add from me, Jax. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to say if Dana did go for it, but otherwise I don't.
Cool. We've got like a little bit of time left, and I'm just wondering, I'm going to leave it up to the panelists to potentially just share their reflections potentially on what you've heard. Anything you feel to share that you feel may be relevant to the any threads within the conversation that you'd like to bubble up, I suppose. Maybe I'll pass to Dana first, if that, or whoever would like to go first, please. Up to you.
Yes, actually, I was just writing to Morgan about this. I mean, but both Kellyanne and Morgan's words were very powerful. But I think for me, that probably the biggest one that it really hit me was whilst I come from First Nations communities, and I've been through a lot of the things that are often articulated as the things that are problems in our community. I've gone through it personally. I've also got to a place of positional power and a level of status that has been given to me due to allies and all sorts of things that have occurred in my life. So I think what made me what both Kellyanne and Morgan said is I've got to keep on thinking about that. And where am I going to make sure that I step aside at the right time? Are there places that I'm holding that I shouldn't be anymore? Is there somewhere where my people should be involved? Others of my people that are involved in a place where I shouldn't be? Or so yes, I would, and particularly around those with lived experience and being able to give that support and be the wind beneath their wings, to be able to fly. Like, what can I do that can be that wind? So that was my reflection. Thank you.
I might go next if you don't mind, Morgan. I think there's a really welcome shift in practice here, away from the fetish of design tools and talking about specific, what's the journey map or what's the interview framework, and so much of that is about sort of, I guess, what we're doing, not so much how we're doing it. So I've really loved, I think, learning from Dana and Morgan, and really from many of you who are on the call and haven't had the chance to share, how much of our work in design is about who we are and how we're being, and thinking about that as a primary thing, and really like a much more, it's not even radical, but a better self-awareness that we're bringing to our work, and hopefully also influencing colleagues to adopt that same level of self-awareness and criticality, I guess, in our practice. If we have a little bit of time at the end, Jax, I wonder if we could call on even a couple of people on the call who I know are some who have way more experience than I do, that would be so valuable to hear their reflections as well. But I'll let Morgan, of course, share first.
Yeah, just briefly, I think just really taking from what Dana said, I really sat with that as well around sort of positionality, which is something I really sit with a lot in my work as well. And, where do I need to step aside, but also where do I need to step up? And sometimes I get really confused in those spaces as well. Because there's a lot of spaces I've really intentionally not been. But then I'm also, yes, Dana's saying, but then it's like, I feel like I have something to say, and I feel like there's places where I can actually be an advocate, that I've been tasked with the communities that I work with. So that's something I'm always kind of thinking about quite often. But also the other thing I just want to quickly add before, I think that's a great point, Kelly, will definitely hand over to other people, just around this kind of the need for kind of critical reflection in the work. And, I think, coming into this work as someone with a lived experience myself, it's very easy to think, oh, I've had a lived experience of harm and I can do no harm, and this is speaking on behalf of myself. It's so important to be able to understand how we still can do harm, because I'm still part of all of these systems. I'm not separate from them. I'm not separate from them because I've been harmed by them. And it's something I'm really passionate about. Just because, when you're situated in a system with power, you have to really be, in my perspective, you have to be really, really critical of almost yourself, and have kind of peers around you that are keeping you accountable, but also just consistently reflecting on why you're doing what you're doing and the intention behind it. And I won't say that I don't know, like this is what I'll be learning forever, but I just think it's an important thing to think that once you have positional power, somehow you are unable to create harmful environments or do harm to someone else. It's an endless kind of journey of learning. Yeah.
Thank you. Kellyanne, I'd be really open to you passing the mic around.
Yeah, I have a few people to call on, and please don't, like, if you don't want to speak, you don't have to. And certainly if I don't call on you, it's not because I don't value you, it's just because we don't have a relationship yet. So these are some people that I've sort of worked closely with or are beginning to know well. So I wonder if Ewan, Denise, Jay, or Leander might want to share some of their reflections as practitioners.
I'm happy to share just a little bit of a reflection on, Dana was talking about reaching out and reaching in, and for me that really resonated. I think this idea that respectful giving is actually the process, and the reason it's really resonating with me is I think so many of the interventions that people experience actually ask so much of them. You know, they take almost as much as they give, and it's that constant taking. It's, you know, asking people to retell the stories that are traumatic to them, as opposed to retell it or sharing the stories that are important to them. And so just reflecting on that understanding, and Dana talking about reaching out, I was like, okay, how can I do more to reach out? And, you know, Dana and I have had a couple of conversations in the past about getting to know your local Aboriginal community. And there is like I know some amazing Aboriginal people through my work, and I think there's a fear or reluctance that I still hold. Like, am I going to say something wrong? Am I going to, you know, am I going to be super uncomfortable? And I think part of the important thing is it's okay to be uncomfortable. You know, that being in discomfort, and really building on what Morgan shared about that. Yeah, that's when you know you're doing something right. So, yeah, thanks so much, Dana, for just reminding me of that. And I've appreciated everything that's been shared tonight. It's been amazing.
I can follow on from Ewan. So I'm very thankful to have been part of the discussions tonight. My brain has just exploded with ideas and thoughts, and my team members are on the call, several of them. I've been writing for them furiously throughout. But I work in an agency that was only set up a year ago, which is about driving innovation and excellence in healthcare in South Australia. And it's very interesting because I'm employed to do human-centered design. So thinking about what you're talking about, Kellyanne, and actually the concepts I live by, and what I sort of feel morally and ethically compelled to do, is to work in a co-design way. And health is very much still about how do we do a journey map, or do a survey, or we might be doing focus groups or doing some sort of deeper listening. But I probably, in 20 years of working in health, I've never really been involved in processes that really shift the power balance and say, what would healthcare look like if we actually gave it back to the community, because it's your local health service. So you tell us what's really going to work for you, what matters, what's going to make you, what can we do to support you, as opposed to what can we do for you or to you. So it's actually, my words are scrambled because my brain is thinking, how do we actually make that shift? That's the big challenge. What steps can we take right now to actually get some traction in that space, which is totally about the locus of power and control. I'll stop there because otherwise I'll ramble.
Hi, it's Leander here. I just thought I'd take that segue of rambling because I think I might ramble. I've got a bit of Melbourne COVID brain at the moment. And I don't know how much I can add to this, but what I did want to share was maybe one experience that I've been reflecting on, particularly reading your book, Kellyanne, and it's kind of helped me as kind of like this question, or this guiding question, while I've been reading that, and while I've been, trying to figure out what my next kind of big project is. And that's this exercise and this work that I was doing with this beautiful Melbourne individual called Michaela Egan, who was actually taking me through an exercise that I can share the broader information around it. But it was actually quite simple, but it was actually just looking at and reflecting on, I guess, formal and informal power, and putting the time into reflecting on what my informal power is and can be, and looking to those things that I have that I can use to share what, as an avenue for me to do what I want to do. So rather than trying to, I don't know, kind of step into a place that isn't authentic or isn't my place to stand in. For me, it was about going, well, what can I offer, and why do I want to be in this space? And looking at the informal power that I do have in addition to the, I guess, formal power I have in my professional role. And that was a huge moment for me to actually kind of go internally rather than look externally for what I could do. And that was a good first step for me. And hopefully once people do that reflective exercise, if you've not already done it, it's a really interesting exercise to do and continue to do regularly. That's all I'll add to that.
I'll have a quick jump in too. Thanks for the call out, Kellyanne, and thanks so much, Dana, Morgan and Kellyanne, for your amazing sharing tonight. I've worked as a human-centered designer for 15 years, and I've always talked about designing with, and yet I have to own that operating within the systems that we operate in, that we're not truly designing with. I've also had over the years what I have considered amazing opportunities to realise going into community in the Torres Strait Islands, for example, to try to engage in change. And despite my best of intentions, I now recognise that the approach and the best of intentions aren't what make the difference there. And Dana, I love the way that you talk about allies, and Kellyanne, the kind of lifting people up and the capability that we can share. And certainly in reading Kellyanne's book, it really started to make me reflect on what role we should take in working in these change projects. I have the risk of rambling on also, but I've also really reflect on the personal work that we all need to do in working in what we do, and really amazed by the reflections that Jay and Leander you've shared in terms of your own reflections going back as we've kind of moved towards more of this designing with, as opposed to kind of using that power that we need to recognise. And I think for me there's also the owning our own lived experience as well, and I'm really inspired by the courage that certainly Morgan you shared in kind of sharing and introducing yourself with your lived experience. And I think I've been drawn into projects over the years because of my lived experience, but not actually owned and shared that. And that's something that I'm certainly going to walk away with. So thanks, guys. So much in that. I really appreciate you sharing.
Right. I love to do a big jazz hands for everybody who's contributed tonight. So thank you all so much. Amazing content, lots to reflect on. I'm really pleased that we ended off on this. I'd like to end with this quote that my friend always says. She goes, you know what? Change is an inside job. I love it. And I think, some of the sentiments that have come up really point to that. So thank you all for your participation, your support of Social Design Sydney, and I really hope to see you soon at one of the things that we keep doing. And big ups and big thanks to all of our speakers and to Sarah for her help with Social Design Sydney. And yeah, thank you all and hope to see you again really soon.